Okay, so this video is going to go through column and bar graphs as well as histograms. Now your column graph is a graph which has rectangles in the format of columns. Each rectangle is the same width, and there's half a rectangle width between each column as well as between the y-axis and the first column. Now it's important you have scaled axes as well as having axes, titles, and a heading for your column graph. Now a bar graph is the same as a column graph, but your columns are now horizontally. So in a column graph, they're vertical. In a bar graph, they're horizontal. Now, a histogram also has vertical columns, so it's similar to a column graph, but the difference is that there's no spaces between the columns. We still have that half column width at the start from the y-axis to the first value, but then our columns are joined. So continuous data is generally displayed in a histogram, and it's important that our x and y axes are scaled, they have axes titles, and that our graph has a title as well. Okay, so our first example is going to be a column graph. So the table shows students' favorite color, and we want to construct a column graph of the data. So our x-axis is going to show the color. So we'll put down here that our axis is the colors, and then we can label the axes. So we've got green, we've got blue, red, yellow, and orange. We then have our frequency. So we can see that our numbers range from 5 through to 19. So what we might do is we might go up in fives on that y-axis. So we've got 5, 10, 15, 20, and this is our frequency. Now what we then need to do is we need to draw our columns. Now we need to remember that there's got to be a gap between our columns, and there's got to be a half column width between the start and the first column. So for our green, we have 12. So using a ruler, you would go from the x-axis up to 12, would then go across and come back down on the other side. We would then go to blue, which has 15. We would go up, to 15. You then go to red, which goes up to 19. You'd go to yellow, which goes to 5. And you would go to orange, which goes to 13. Okay, so I've just updated those columns just so that they're a bit more accurate. So you need to make sure you use a ruler. Every column needs to be the same width, and the distance between those columns needs to be the same. So each gap in between the columns has to be the exact same width, and ideally that column between the y-axis and that first column should be the same width as well. On mine it's slightly bigger, but on your paper copy it should be a bit easier to make sure that those are scaled accurately. As with our other graphs, you need to make sure that this one has a heading. So here it's student's favorite color. So you'd have a title of student's favorite color. Okay, we then have a bar graph. So this is the same as our column graph, but now obviously our frequency is at the bottom of the graph because our columns are now horizontal. So if we go along the bottom here, and if we put our frequency in, so if I go along and create an axis. Okay, so if I go along the bottom there and just create an axis, we'll just make this a bit of a darker color just so that you can see it a little bit easier. So we've got the axes there. What we then need to do is mark that axis, so like we did on the last one, but this time you're going to have so 5, 10. Okay, and you'd also put in your color types on that y-axis as well. Now, just having a look at this one, just with our previous slide, I did forget to put one color in, so we forgot to put purple in. So what we would just do is we'd put a column in on the end here. We take it down to 11, and then we'll just add a label which says that this is purple. And we'll just put that in there. So we've got a labeled column there as purple. Sorry about that. Okay, so our bar graph, we've got our frequency at the bottom here. We have our colors at the side. We need axes labels. So if we label this axis here, this is our colors. And then if we label the axes down here, this is our frequency. So you got your axes labeled. The next thing we need to do is we need to put in our columns. So again, starting at green, we have a column that needs to go 12, but this time it's now a bar. We leave that half width still. We then put in our blue, so it's going to 15. And we go through all of our data sets and put those bars. So for red, we have 19. Purple, we have 11. For yellow, we have 5. And for orange, we have 13. Now, as with our other graphs, this one also needs a title. So similar to our column graph on the previous slide, we can give it a title, which is students and colors. We'll just move it down there so you can see it. So that's our bar graph. Okay, and our final example is a histogram. So remember, our histogram, it still has the column width, half column width at the start, but then our columns are now touching. So here we've got continuous data. So that tells us that we need to have a histogram. So we're going to go from 0 to 6 on that x-axis, and then we're going to go up in 2s on our y-axis. So we'll just set that up and label that. Okay, so we have those axes set up. So I'm actually going to go up in 4s on the y-axis, and then we have 0 to 6, leaving that half column width at the start on the x-axis. We then are going to put in our columns. So from 0 to less than 1, we have 8. That means that our column here is going to be 8. Then from 1 to 2, we have 17. From 1 to 2 is 17. From 2 to 3 is 27. From 3 to 4 is 32. from 4 to 5. Is 10. And for 5 or more, we have 6. Now you can see here from me putting the columns in, my scaling of my X values wasn't quite accurate. So what should happen is these numbers should be on the bounds of your column. So as you can see, I'm just moving them across. So when you set up your histogram, make sure that you set it up so that when you draw it, it is accurate. So you can see from 0 to 1, it's 8. From 1 to 2, 17. 2 to 3, we have 27. From 3 to 4, we have 32. 4 to 5, we have 10. And from 5 to 6, we have 6. Now, key features of a histogram are we must make sure that we have a title. So here it's the hours spent gaming by year 7s. We then have to have our axis title. So here is our number of students. And then at the bottom, that is our hours. Now, generally that title will go underneath the axes, but just because of space on my screen here, I've just got to put it on the side there. But